Greetings and welcome to this all-new Trapcode Tao session. I hope you are doing fine, folks. I'm pretty excited because for once I created something that actually works. After a couple of attempts and actually setting it aside because I was quite failing at it, I finally find a, I think, pretty solid way to create these kind of loops using this technique from Peder Norrby, the guy who created Trapcode Tao and many other pretty cool plugins for After Effects. So once I've seen this, and I'm gonna put a link on down below in the description for the tutorial he makes for that, which is pretty straightforward and it works pretty fine. And as soon as I saw this, I did a couple of little experiments for myself, and I realized that it works pretty fine. It worked pretty fine when you extrude geometry, but when you repeat geometry, I always had some troubles up to now. So I think that I find a pretty good way. I'm gonna just recreate this thing that I built, and on which we can then scramble the values and get many variations out of that. And it's always gonna loop, and we are repeating spheres, so it also works repeating geometry. And there are many factors that can make it not loop, but let me just show you step by step how I did this, and hopefully you're gonna learn something useful out of it. So let's start off by creating a new composition. I'm gonna call this Tao, and I'm gonna already save this to Tao stream loop 4. And as we always do, I'm gonna start by creating a new solid, which I'm gonna call Tao, and on which I'm gonna apply Tao 2. So let's apply Tao to that, and I'm gonna also right away create a light, which I'm gonna call Tao all caps, and it's gonna be a spotlight, and I'm gonna make it pure white. So I'm gonna click OK, and then I have that here. I'm gonna create a new solid, and I'm gonna call this Tao null. I'm gonna make it 3D, and I'm gonna pick up the position from here. So I'm gonna copy the data, Control C, and I'm gonna hit Control V to paste it here, so it brings it right at the center. I'm gonna turn off. Where are you, Tao? Alright, I'm gonna turn off the path generator, so we see only our lights, and I'm gonna set the size from radius settings. So I'm gonna check this one, and what we're gonna do at first is simply use this Dan Ebert's wiggle expression, and it's a looping wiggle. So we're gonna create the basic motion for our path. So let's do this. I'm gonna simply copy this. I don't need to necessarily understand the math behind it. So I'm gonna hit P on the position of my light, and I'm gonna alt click on the stopwatch here, and I'm gonna paste the code from Dan Ebert's, and it's gonna show up here. So a few things. By default it's set to 3 seconds, so I am gonna use this value. And what I'm gonna do right away, as one thing that I find pretty useful to do, is I'm gonna create a couple of custom slider controls here to help us sculpt and tweak around our things without having to type down manually the values. So let's I'm gonna call this main path position, main path wiggle X. Yes, and I'm gonna duplicate that, and no, I'm just gonna make a main wiggle, and I'm gonna make one for the frequency, and I'm gonna make one for the amplitude. So I'm simply gonna use the pick whip. I'm gonna select the value here for the frequency, so 1. I'm gonna drag this to my slider for the frequency, and I'm gonna set this one back to 1, and this is gonna be 110, so the default values, and I'm simply gonna pick up this and drag the pick whip onto the slider here, so nothing should have changed here. One other thing that I'm gonna do is right click here, get in the transform, auto orient, and I'm gonna set that to off to make sure that my light is not going to be aimed where the point of interest is aimed at. So now that I've got that, and that I've got these settings here, I'm gonna lock this here to keep it there, and I'm gonna get back to my Tao. I'm gonna hit F3, and I'm gonna bring it down here, so I can have access to both here, and then I can use this to change the amplitude of my wiggle. So this is what my light is doing, and it's doing it over the course of 90 frames, so 3 seconds. So I'm gonna create a marker here. I'm gonna hit Shift 1 here, and I'm gonna hit B to close down the work area, and I'm gonna go right up to the frame 180 at 6 seconds here, so double the 3-second loop. I'm gonna close this by hitting N, and I'm gonna create a new marker, so I can move back and forth between those two, and this, as a general rule, should always be exactly the same as this if we want to have a serious loop. And at frame 179, actually, I'm going to hit N to close the work area, and I'm simply going to make another marker if I want to go up to there. And that being said, we also need to go in the duration if no keyframe value here, and instead of 10 we're gonna put 6, because that's for the first 3 seconds it's gonna oh yeah, and let's go ahead and set that to build up. So basically this is going to go along our wiggle path here up to the point here where it's going to loop, and it's going to go around and create the exact same path once again. All right. Then what we can also do, if we want to have a kind of a way to scramble this, sometimes when you're working with wiggles, like if we were to add a new layer here, each time our thing would change. So sometimes you want to keep the same result you have initially. So what is good to do at the start here, if we want to keep this wiggle no matter how many layers we add later on, this is how we do it. We're going to type down seed random here, and for the moment we can put 0 here. So that's by default the wiggle is using the index number. So when we add, it's going to use the next index number, but if we specify it to be 0, then we can manually change. So this one was the one that we had by default if I want to get back to this one. But I'm going to maybe add here a wiggle scramble setting, and I'm going to set it to 1 for a moment, and I'm going to connect this to that. So this will simply make it so I have something that I can easily change the seed random for my motion, my main wiggle motion. So next, let's go in the segments, and we're gonna repeat spheres instead of the basic extrusions that we get, and we're gonna perhaps increase the amount of segments. And now let's try maybe 200. So let's see if we have the same here as here. It's not the same, so let's put 100, and it's kind of different because it's going the first time, and when it's going the second time, it's our pieces are not exactly at the same spot, so it's not creating an exact the same thing. We want it to be the same, so I've noticed that the only thing that matters here is that this value is an odd and not an even number. So if now I check it up, yes, there will be this at the end, but our pieces will be at the exact same place. And no matter how many segments that we use here, we can have, I don't know, if we had 66, it's an even number, it won't work. It would be different. But if I put down 55, then it's correct. So that's something that I can't explain, and let's make them more spherical by setting the sides to 12. So frame 90, frame 180, it's the same. We can make a loop out of that. So that's cool. Next, let's get in the size. Maybe we can have them smaller, so then we can actually increase this to 555. So now we have a nice spherical stream, and we can always make it wider by changing this. And if we want the motion to be more erratic, we can increase the frequency. So if I had 2 here, it would have time to move around more in the duration of the 3 seconds duration. So it, as a result, we'll have a more complex shape, but our segments will be more spaced. So that's the logic behind that. Let's keep it at 1 for the moment, and let's add some randomness. Let's disperse those segments. So let's make them even smaller, maybe, and let's add more. And there is here a randomness tab. So first, my first reflex would be to increase that, maybe to disperse them, and then get what I want by having this and like getting some random on the scale. But now if I compare both the first and the last frame, there will be some difference. It won't work even if the number is an odd number here. So that's because this randomness doesn't take into account the fact that it's looping. It's just gonna make it randomly dispersed on this first pass here, and on the second pass is gonna randomly disperse them differently. So maybe that's one thing you want, but in this case I wanted to make it loop, so I will have to keep those values at 0. As a general rule, if we want this technique to work with the loop, we have to not use the randomness here. But what if we want to have this dispersion? We can use the wiggle, and it has to loop. So let's add more layer controls, the slider controls here. So let's make one. Let's make 3 intermediate ones. So we're gonna call that disperse X, and then I'm gonna control D to duplicate them, and to make a disperse Y, disperse Z, and to have all 3 axes. And these will be intermediate sliders. And then let's make more. So I'm gonna simply make a disperse frec X and disperse amp X, and also make sure that I have for all the axes. So this way we're setting up kind of our own custom command settings, like our main control board, which will make it easier for us to get more visual variations by having the centralized here. So let's now that we've connected, we can connect our light to the null here, so nothing should change. Our null is right at the center, and we're gonna make this null shake by putting wiggles to that. So first we're gonna divide the three axes. So maybe we want to make it wiggle, like disperse only on the X and not on the Z and not on the Y. So for that we need these three to be separate. So first let's alt click on the stopwatch here, and I'm gonna open bracket, and let's select disperse X, comma, disperse Y, comma, disperse Z, and close the bracket. So now this will have moved our whole system, because it's now at 0, 0, 0. It was at 540 in the center, so let's get those back at 540. The X and the Y, the Z we can keep at 0. So now we're back at exactly what we had, and we're gonna connect those to those. So let's hit E on our Tau null here, so we can see all our different settings here, and we're gonna start by setting those up. So the X, let's wiggle that, so we can once again use the wiggle from Dan Ebert, so it's looping. So let's alt click here on the stopwatch, and I'm gonna paste that here, keep it at 3 seconds, and for the frequency I can select that here and connect it to the disperse frec X, and I'm gonna connect the amplitude to disperse X amplitude right there, and they're both at 0, so it doesn't change anything. I'm gonna copy that to disperse Y as well, and I'll click here, and simply gonna change those X's here to make Y's instead. So let's delete that Y, because we're gonna do it on Z as well. And let's paste, and instead of X, let's put capital Z. So what we did here, now we've created some way to disperse our segments. So let's start with X. I'm gonna put frequency of 1, and then I'm gonna crank up the amplitude. So let's put 400, and let's increase the frequency. So let's put 45. Now we've got too much, so let's put it down to 45 as well. So now we are getting some dispersion with our segments on the X-axis, and since it's looping, our first and our last frame should be the same. That's cool. So once again, the more frequency we have, the more erratic our dispersion is going to be, and the less that we have here, the less it's going to be. And like, let's cut it down by half, and it's gonna disperse less. So maybe we want to put something like a 90 here. And let's set that to 38, I don't know. And let's also disperse it. And oh, one thing we can do also is add a seed random for that. So let's call it disperse scramble. And once again, here we can add seed random, seed seed random parentheses disperse scramble close parentheses. So that will also be our seed random for the dispersion, and we're gonna simply use the same for the. I don't see why we wouldn't use the same one for all three, so we can copy that there. And let's also make it dispersed on the Y, and I'm gonna start off with the same value to see what we get out of it. And the more it seems that the more expression we have, the more the longer it takes to render. So that's one thing that I've noticed. Anyway, let's disperse it. Let's make and sort that values are not exactly the same, and let's disperse it a little bit on the Z, so 22 and maybe, I don't know, 70. So let's see what we get out of that. So that's quite nice dispersion, and if I go to frame 1, it's the same. So let's decrease the amount of segments. So we'll get and for the moment perhaps we can make the amount of sides 6. It doesn't make quite a big difference, and always making sure that we've got an odd number here. So let's see if it's still exact the same. Yes, I'm gonna save, and we can apply the same principle for the scale now of our so one other thing that we'll do is let's add another one of those expression controls, and let's call this size random. And for this one I'm gonna not bother about setting so what controls the size is the radius here, since we've checked it. So here we can one more time have the Dan Ebert's wiggle here, and for a frequency of 180 and an amplitude that we're going to connect to the size random here. So now 0, but if we want to have a little bit of randomness on the scale, we can increase that now, and that'll work. And maybe make this number higher so there's more difference. So that's one way that we can have randomness on the scale and make it compatible with our looping technique. So now we're not using the so now all our randomness values here are at 0, but we have the randomness that we initially wished, and it's gonna work for the loop. So next we're gonna add some movement to that, and let's go in the offset animation sequence, and we're gonna turn it on, and right off the bat we can set the duration to 6 just to make it less confusing for us. So this is going to be the course of what we can put here on our offset animation sequence values. So let's get at frame 0 and click on the stopwatch for the world position YOAS, and let's hit 3 so we get at our last frame, our very last frame that we want to output, and we're gonna decrease this value here, or maybe we can decrease it, or in this case we're gonna increase it, so it's gonna go down, so it's gonna kind of simulate some gravity here, and as it builds up it's going to do all our wiggles here and our variations, and it's gonna go down, and if we bring it further enough, like we're gonna, if we don't bring it further enough, let me first show you what happens. Whoops. For example, if I don't bring it down enough, the last part here, it needs to be out of the picture for it to be able to loop correctly. So what we had first, something around that. Sorry for that. It seemed to work fine. So something like that, we can find the value based on that, which is going to be fine by testing it. So I'm hitting 3 and 1, and just looking at the bottom here if there is any variation. For the moment there is not, so I'm gonna continue to decrease that. I still don't have any, and change it while I'm on the frame 180, of course. So 1000, what does it? At 1000 we're still okay. At 900, yeah, we're starting to have some. So this is what you basically don't want to get if you want to your loop to work perfectly. So in this case, 960 will make it so that it doesn't matter. So now, if I RAM preview this this part, it is going to loop quite perfectly. So that's good. That's cool. That's exactly what we want. And based off that, we can, of course, make it more complex. Always by making sure that we're gonna increase this amount back at the end, but while we work at it, we might keep it at a fairly reduced amount, because each time we don't want to wait this amount of time each time. So wow, this is nice. So maybe I want now to get a different dispersion. So I'm going to scramble those. I'm going to scramble this value, and we're going to keep the same path, but we're going to get a different variation for our scrambling, for our dispersing. So now I'm noticing that perhaps we need the frequency to be more increased on the Y and X frequency, because we want more, even more randomness there. Is that, if it's possible? So let's set that to 168. So that's going to increase the amount of randomness that we get. Now we get more like some kind of a stream. I'm going to save that. And always make sure that we don't do something that breaks our loop. So now that this is set up, we can still go back at frame 1, at frame number at marker 1 and marker 3 to make sure that they are showing the same image here, which is the case right now. So we're good. But now we're gonna reduce the amount of segments, unfortunately, and perhaps make this quarter. It's still a little bit too long for my taste to wait. So let's set that down to 437, maybe, just to get an idea. But now we can go in the repeat path, and we can start repeat this to get more instead of adding segments, maybe. So let's add 4 repetitions, and let's not repeat them along the X, but let's try that. Let's try to increase the segment position Z, so it's gonna pull them out each step. If we want to bring it down, then we can reduce this, so each step will be less drastic, and then increase back this value. So that's something that we can mess around with. Let's also add let's verify if we still have a loop, and sometimes we'll have like those that are now visible at the bottom, so perhaps it's good to prevent that by making sure that we have enough space. So let's bring it more down, and let's force refresh it. So yeah, we have one that decided that it's going to be in a different posture, which is unfortunate. We can scramble the repeater here. Will it change something? No, not that I can be aware of. Let's change the position randomness a little bit, like 22. So that will scramble it around. That will disperse it a little bit more, but still we're keeping a pattern here. And if we want to color them, that's especially useful. So let's create a new texture composition. So let's make it 500 by 500. We don't need it to be that big. Click OK, and we got our small composition here. Let's hit Command Shift C, and let's leave all the attributes. So let's get inside here, and I'm gonna right click, get in the layer style, and gradient overlay, and right here I'm gonna simply put down some arbitrary colors, which will probably not be quite nice, but it's just to illustrate that we can perhaps this will really not be nice. Anyway, so let's start with that, and let's get in the repeat path and repeat color layer. Let's select our text, and we're not in the right way. So let's get back in here, and we're going to create an adjustment layer by hitting Control Alt Y, and I'm going to simply add a transform effect, distort, transform, and rotation 90 degrees. Just make sure that we're looking at it from this angle, and I'm going to hit Control Alt front slash to refresh, and now we're getting our repetition coloration. So that's good. Then we can repeat the repetition. So let's shut down the symmetric doubler, and let's add 4 more here. So this will repeat that, and we don't want to repeat it on the Y. What we want to do, maybe once again, add some randomness here on the position of the segments. So let's try that first. Boom, and it's exploding, but the segment position factor is still at 1, so let's bring it down to 0.33, and this will reduce the amount of space in between the steps of our repetition. So perhaps we can 0.53, and then add some segment position randomness. So there we've got something. So the way our repetition of color is going on here is not like exactly what would happen if we would use it simply as a texture of all that. We can get different result out of that. So let me show you the difference. Here we can get in the texture, and let's use our same exact gradient here. So if we were to set that as a normal texture, this is what we'll get. So each sphere is going to be mapped with the gradient that we have. So this is not what we want to get. Still, we have different options here. X fractal Y. I'm not sure it's going to change it, but X world X or X world Y. And do we have to actually refresh that? No. But this, let's shut off our adjustment layer here, and let's do that once again. So that's, yeah. If we have the gradient the other way, we can we would be able to have some kind of coloration based on the depth using the X world Z on our texture here. And now it's only repeating the yellow and green part, but we would be able to change that by messing around with one of those here. Have these kind of way of repeating the colors. So that's one way, and that's the other way. But in this case, I chose not to use the texture coloration, but instead to repeat, to color based on the repetition. That makes it. This wasn't what we had before in terms of. Let's take a picture of that, and I'm gonna undo a few steps if I can. No, I won't be able to. Won't I? Oh yeah, okay. So this is what we get when we have this on this side, but when we have it on this, and then I'm gonna refresh. So it makes all our streaks like its own color. So that's perhaps one interesting way of coloring stuff. So does the color loop as well? Yes. And it's still not going down enough. So let's test this out. And it's working pretty fine. And now maybe what we want to do also is to have it less, a little bit more gradual on the scale of our little spheres here as it grows. So we simply can get in the OAS size, and let me create a keyframe here on the OAS size and hit U, so it reveals up here, and I'm gonna bring it here, create another one, and the one that's at frame 0 I'm gonna set it to 0, so that will kind of taper it out, so it will have them grow based on the tip of our streak here. And then it's pretty fun up to here because we can always scramble everything. So I'm not happy with the way it disperses. I can scramble it, and I will get a different result. And I can scramble many things. I can scramble the whole path, test out some other way of having it disperse around, so that's pretty cool. And oh, on this one, it obviously like needs to go even more down. So let's increase the amplitude of our wiggle, and let's bring this back to 1. So this one I like it a little bit better. It goes a little bit more around. So let's make a nice background. So I'm gonna make it the comp size, and I don't know, let's add a ramp, and let's make it a radial ramp. And what color would be great around here? I don't know. Let's keep it maybe dark, but have some kind of greenish, bluish light here. That would come off, and maybe not that right. So just a little subtle here. And then what we can do is get in the visibility and select a color that is around our background, and we can also look at where is our depth limit. So let's bring this down down to 3000. See if we lose anything. No. So that means we can bring this down to 3000, and let's bring this down to 1000. So now we're starting to get something. Let's bring this one down to that, and we're trying to determine where it starts and where it ends. So this one needs to be closer now, and this one further. So we're really not spreading out a lot on the Z at all. So 1666, and let's now close down on this. Tweaky. Oh, we're getting close to the point that we're looking for. So right around this, like, we're just trying to make some of those who are further back to get a little bit colored by the background, so it looks a little bit more integrated, more so we didn't lose anything. We're not losing the loop. I'm not sure it's pretty convincing. Let's add an ambient light. So let's make it kind of the same ranges of our background, but brighter. Maybe not that bright. And let's hit OK. And now we're getting kind of a more darker ambience. Let's add a point light, and let's call it Tao Lumi, and let's make this one a warm color. And let's get in Tao material and lighting, and let's activate that. Not include Tao lights, include Lumi lights. Alright, so let's start to bring it at 0, and now let's bring it towards us, like 100 pixels towards us, and let's bring it a little bit higher. let's increase it a little bit. Now everything is going to brighten up. Perhaps we can move it around. And now we can go and fine tune. So this we can increase pretty much to get this kind of result. Maybe I'm gonna stop it there with messing around with that. But for the moment, that's pretty fine. We're getting some kind of light direction from up there. We're getting nice specularity. Let's reduce the shininess, so that will let's make it 12, so that will brighten up our specular. Let's decrease the specular. And we're at half settings, so we can have a glimpse at full, and still our spheres like are some kind of low poly, because we don't have many segments. But remember, we're trying to keep everything low, so we don't have anything that's chugging, but that's kind of the result we would get. And we can also increase the presence of our ambient occlusion. Since we have really tiny pieces of geometry, we want to make this number smaller. So let's put 0.45 here, and that will increase, and let's reduce the radius of it. So that will and let's increase the intensity just to check. Now it's going to go all over the place, and we can maybe increase the lift to pull it back. But there are still some that will be very, very, very dark, so we need to decrease that. But from here we can get like pretty nice darkened parts based on the ambient occlusion, which is basically contact shadows. So if the fact that we have small pieces is kind of making it sort that we need to set it to be quite small, so that can so let's take a picture, and let's undo quite a few times until we're back at the default values. So that's what we're starting with, and F8. So we're bringing some shadows. Some are not very nicely positioned, but that's one way that we can bring in a little bit more shadow details in here. So I'm gonna hit Command Shift Z now to get back at here, and maybe it needs to be bigger. And let's turn this back down. So that's maybe more something that looks a little bit less crazy. Nice little shadows there. And the dithering, well, depends on what looks best. Try the others, and if we don't use any dithering, it might render faster, and if it looks good that way, well, you can pretty much get away with it. So that's something that we have now. Let's increase the colors in there, and maybe make it brighter, and let's see what we get if we use some built-in environments. Maybe the green forest would look pretty nice, but not that much in it. Maybe just 12 for the reflection strand, just to get a little bit of reflection details on our spheres here. Some glimpses of oh, sometimes it just changes like that for no reason. So that makes it, you see this little thing here, if I turn this off, oh, we lose all the detail. And if I turn this in, but now we have too much ambient light. So when we have this on, we can turn down the ambient light. So we're getting back at something that's more diffused. And of course, over all that, it's always fine to add a general curves to get more closely to where you want, depending on what you're after. And the Lumi, we can reduce the radius. We can add some Fresnel, just a little bit, and increase the diffuse holdout a little bit, like to 55. And then crank up the diffusion. I'm turning around in circles, folks. So let's get back to the fog color. This thing can be a little bit less saturated and maybe a little bit darker. So just messing around now. Basically, I think I'll add a little bit of the ambient light back in. I kind of liked that. And all of this is kind of too saturated. So what I'm going to do is overall add an adjustment layer, and none of our wiggles are affected by adding some layers, which is also pretty cool. So I'm gonna add a curves on here and a tint, basically just to pull off some of the bright color. And also I can bring the project to at least 16 bits to get a little bit less of banding in my gradient, and play around my curve. Oops. And also in this case, one cheat that I sometimes do is over all that, like our light direction, our ramp, let's see here, it's coming from there. So I can, like, if we have nothing selected, I'm gonna pick up the pen here and I'm gonna kind of make just a general shape of a cone, as if it was some light casting here. And I have this kind of an orange color here. I'm gonna add a fast blur to that, and I'm gonna crank this up pretty much. I'm gonna set this one to add, and I'm gonna tone it down, so that way I can kind of add a second layering of light that will affect my sculpture, depending on what you want to get once again. So that's one thing. Let's get back in our Tao curve here. I feel that we need to reset this, or maybe just make it a little bit darker here, and then bring the mids up back again. So let's see if we have the same at frame number 1 and frame number 3. Yeah, pretty cool. Alright, I think I'll stop here. So I'm gonna post the result here. Oh no, I'm not gonna stop here. One last thing. That's pretty cool. Let's look at that. Let's look at it. Let's see how it looks. That's fun. Yeah, if we want to have a little bit of general motion in here, right now they're all still once they appear. An easy way we can do that is, now we could add more sliders for that, but I'm just gonna hard code it on that one. On the, like for example on position X, why wouldn't we add a wiggle there? So let's pick up the wiggle from here. Or actually, let's pick it up from Dan's website, and let's simply alt-click on the offset dimension sequence position X. Let's paste, and let's make sure we have values that make sense here for what's happening. So we probably can put an amplitude of 30 and a frequency of not that big, so 0.56, and a loop time of 3, so they will kind of move around on the X. Let's see what that does. So instead of staying perfectly still, they should kind of wobble around once they are generated. And we didn't add any of the fractal settings yet, but that would kind of displace the shape of our spheres. And if we want organic movement here, but we want to keep our spheres all perfect spheres, well, that's one way that we can do it. And other things that we know that we can do here, if we keep within the boundaries of that, is for example the transform settings that we changed here. Well, we can make it pulsate per example, just by let's add a keyframe on all those, and position random, and let's add a keyframe on the repeat number 2, and not on the position factor but on position random, and let's hit U. So now we have all those. Let's hit 1, and so we're getting back here. Let's copy those here to make sure that we have the same. Why is it not the same? Oh, because I need to get the OAS world position Y out of the selection here. So just copy those back here on the marker number 1, and we're gonna get at the center, and we're gonna bring all those to smaller values. So 5 here. Let's try 5. And that will make our second repetition less dispersed. And let's try 5 here on the segment position random, and let's try 12, 12, 24, 22, 22, 22. So they will all like contract. I don't know. Perhaps it's not gonna look great, but it's just one thing that we can try here, and we're gonna soften the beginning and the start, and the keyframe in the middle we're gonna make it a circled keyframe like this by control clicking it, and then we can get inside and bring those here on the left and on the right if we wanted our middle state to be kept a little bit longer in our animation. And I'm just randomly doing things now, but let's test that. So it's gonna do exactly the same that it was doing before, and it will wobble our kind of repeated branches out of our thing, and it will also, as it does that, contract all our repeated streams, and that will kind of make it pulsate. So that's one thing that I was just trying there, and we know that this will loop, so it's not that great, but it's something. And perhaps the randomness can stay higher. So let's put 43 there. So that's gonna make something different. It's gonna be different. Let's try that. And what else? Let's get back to our main null now, and I'm gonna hit F3, and our main movement, let's put 1.23 for the frequency, so that will make something different. And for the path wiggle amplitude, let's put 444, and that will make it less spread around as the whole motion. And let's scramble that. So let's try seed number 144, just because I don't know, so we can have work out nice variation that we can test out and look at the results, and we know that it's always gonna loop. Let's look at that. Alright, it's pretty random. I'm gonna stop that here. So I would like to thank Peder Norrby. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, but pardon me if I don't, for making such a great plugin and making my life, and I hope many of you out there, more interesting and more prone to happy experimentations and creative fun. So have a good day, and see you soon in another tutorial. Thank you for watching.